Hey, Ajahn, you may start.
Very good. Well, I'll begin by saying good morning and good evening to the people on the screen. And I'll begin in a traditional way for giving Dhamma talks. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang Dhammang Sanghang Namasami. Well, it's very lovely to be invited to this Buddhist group in Indonesia. It's my first encounter, my first exposure to Indonesians. And Mickey, who has organized this and invited me to speak, has just given me a little bit of introduction to the group, and I know that you have a fairly strong connection with Thai Buddhism, and that is in fact the tradition that I come from, and I thought I would talk a little bit about that tradition, my tradition, today. I'm part of a series of monasteries that exists begins of course in Thailand, but exists now throughout the Western world and Australia, Europe, the US and Canada, and various places, all really founded from and inspired by the teachings of an old meditation master, teacher from Thailand named Ajahn Chah, who was from the northeast of Thailand, which is a kind of a heartbed of Buddhist culture, especially of forest monasteries. Forest monasteries in Buddhism have a vital role, it seems, throughout history, because they are dedicated more prominently to meditation practice. Very important that many monks gravitate towards scholastic pursuit, learning suttas, memorizing suttas, and being able to speak very, very clearly and coherently about them. But there are monks also who are given to formal meditation practice, and that becomes the focus of their attention. Which isn't to say that meditation monks do not take an interest in suttas, because they do, but there is this emphasis in forest monasteries on what we call formal meditation practice. So Ajahn Chah was very much an exponent of this tradition, became very famous in Thailand during his lifetime after a very, very arduous decades of practice of meditation, wandering as a forest monk from one forest to another, living very, very Spartanly or very, very simply as a forest monk, but using the simplicity as a means to gauge the depths and the quality of his own heart and mind. And it's generally well understood. We certainly have faith in the fact that through his devotion to practice and through his skill and wisdom, he gained some levels of awakening. So we look to him as a great teacher. And he's on my mind right now very much at the small monastery in which I live. We're looking at our calendar on June 17th. It's actually Ajahn Chah's birthday. He passed away many years ago now, but we still honor his date of birth. So lately we've been reading from a beautiful biography written of Ajahn Chah by Ajahn Pavaro, who is a British monk who's lived in Thailand for many decades now. So we've been reading from this just to gain a sense again of the strength and beauty of Ajahn Chah's life, and to regain a sense of that precious gratitude we have for his example, his teachings, and his generosity of spirit. So we've been, as I say, we've been reflecting a great deal on him recently. I was telling Nikki, who is the coordinator of these sessions, that our abbot here, Ajahn Viradhammo, he is actually 47 Vasa, so he's been a monk for 47 years now, coming up to 48. And he actually began his training as a monk with Ajahn Chah. So it's very lovely to be in a monastery in which the abbot has a living recollection of Ajahn Chah's physical presence and spirit and voice and so forth. So that's a great thing for us. It's morning in Canada, so getting my throat in order here. One of the characteristics of the forest tradition is that very often, at least in northeast Thailand, very often the leading exponents of the tradition have come out of very simple backgrounds, very simple circumstances. Rice farming, of course, is very common. It was and it still is the case in northeast Thailand, and so you have often great forest masters who were born on farms or were brought up in a very, very simple way. And for this reason, I think the teachings that they have access to, the similes, the metaphors that come naturally to the mind, come out of a simple kind of farming culture and the day-to-day occupations of a person living in these circumstances. And it's, I think, the simplicity and directness of Ajahn Chah's teachings, which derive from his background, but of course he brings to the simplicity of his origins and background. He brings to this tremendous wisdom and a very penetrating intelligence. So I often think of a saying that he had, which I come back to this again and again because it's very beautiful. It's humorous on the first hearing, but it's very beautiful and very penetrating, I think. He said, looking for happiness is like looking for a turtle with a mustache. You'll never find it. But prepare your heart, and happiness will come looking for you. So you receive a teaching like that, and first of all, it brings a smile to the face because, as he rightly says, we'll never, in a lifetime's search, we'll never find a turtle with a mustache, or with a beard, or a set of glasses, probably. But of course, the turn of this expression is that it's very similar to where we're searching for happiness. We're looking for happiness outside of us. In other words, the mind is drawn here and there, where we feel a sense of lack for this and for that, and we achieve something. We get given this. We acquire that. And we think it will make us happy, but as soon as we have it, the happiness seems to just fall through our fingers like water. So this pursuit of happiness is I suppose, common to the human condition, and equally common to the human experience of that pursuit is that it is, we would say, ephemeral. It changes. It's unreliable. Or as Ajahn Chah often said, it's maine. It's uncertain. You can't depend on it. And in Ajahn Chah's teachings, it seems that The Buddhist principle, one of the characteristics of existence, impermanence, anicca, anicca, was most often translated as uncertainty. It gives to the teaching, the truth of anicca, it gives to this truth a kind of psychological importance, because the effect of impermanence is that things are uncertain. Our bodies are uncertain. Our loved ones, their life, their health, their existence, their presence, their support is uncertain. Their sense of humor is uncertain. The weather is uncertain. Everything surrounding us in our lives, everything which constitutes our life, is uncertain. We can't rely on it. We depend on things. Something being uncertain doesn't mean that we ought not to be appreciative of it, grateful for it, but it means that it can't be relied on as a source of security, as a lasting source of happiness, dependability, and so forth. So where do we look? Where do we look? Well, Luang Por Chah says, prepare the heart and happiness will come looking for us. How do we prepare the heart? Well, the answer to that, one answer to that in the tradition that I've been kind of introducing is, as we know in Buddhism, is this acquaintance over time with the value, the profundity, the virtues of meditative practice, because it's in this way that we encounter and we come to know, we gain increasing acquaintance with the texture of our own experience. In other words, we develop a sense of understanding for the nature of our hearts and minds. And in this way, as just to continue Ajahn Chah's little saying here, this is the way we prepare ourselves for happiness to come calling on us. We become receptive to things as they are. We can see in this way the beauty of things as they are, the truth of their reality, the real structure, the real texture of things. So this is kind of how he would teach. He would teach his monks and nuns and the lay people from morning to night, and using simple kinds of statements like this just to get them thinking. Sometimes surprising things, he would say. Sometimes maybe a little bit shocking, just to make a person stop and think. So he was a great teacher. I have a little quotation here which relates to impermanence, which I've just been talking about. He says, "Now this is the important point. If you know that all things are impermanent, all your thinking will gradually unwind. When you reflect on the uncertainty of everything that passes, you'll see that all things go the same way. Whenever anything arises, all you need to say is, 'Oh, another one.'" That kind of acquaintance with the nature of things to change, of course we need to understand things intellectually, and it's important to have read suttas and read Dhamma talks and listened to Dhamma talks and reflected on impermanence again and again and again, because our minds require that acquaintance and reacquaintance and constant reminder, basically. But it's in meditation that we really instill in ourselves an appreciation for the value of these perceptions. And it's through meditation, constant reflection or regular reflection, that the mind can become attuned to seeing things arising and passing away, and to say, "Oh, another one. It's come again. Something's happening. Something has just arisen. It will pass. something has risen. It will remain for a short time and pass away. So this is a kind of education that we give ourselves, that the world gives us if we're open to it, and that we take in, and slowly we come to understand the way things are, using this great truth of impermanence as the great teacher of our lives. The last thing I was thinking about as I was contemplating speaking with you today, offering these reflections, was something which I find often for me the short and simple truths are often the most impactful because they're easy to recall and bring to the mind regularly. But he said once, and I wrote down in a little book I keep with me, we must find our own practice and persevere. We must find our own practice and persevere. As I think everyone on this call knows, and I'm sure the people who will listen to this recorded talk in the days to come know, Buddhism. The Buddha offered a huge variety of practices. The classical number is 40 focuses or objects of meditation, 40 different types of meditation, but there are many more techniques than just 40 that are available to people. Everyone will know that there are dozens and dozens and dozens of lists of important terms, little groupings of themes which people are offered to reflect on. The Buddha taught in so many ways and through thousands and thousands of Dhamma discourses. So it's a very vast reservoir of teaching and truth that we have available to us as Buddhists. But what Ajahn Chah is saying here is that through all of this, owing to our own particular disposition, our own way of approaching things in this world, our own talents and things that we do well, things that we don't do so well, things that we gravitate to, things that we don't find so interesting, we're all different. And the reason I think that he gave teachings of such a vast variety and array is that some of them are going to appeal to anyone who takes at all an interest in the Dhamma, in understanding Dhamma and becoming more aware and more wise in their lives. But will do so with just a small, a handful of these teachings. We don't need to understand the full breadth of them necessarily. What Ajahn Chah is recommending there is a serious study, basically going back to the first thing that I quoted, a serious study of our own hearts and minds. We need to understand ourselves well enough to know what we gravitate towards in our practice lives and our lives of Dhamma. There are various forms of meditation. Which of them really seem to address our particular disposition, our character, our skills? Where does mindfulness most easily arise and remain stable? Find that in yourself. Look for it and find it. Don't be in too much of a hurry to look here and there in the next place. Sit with something for a while. I often somewhat jokingly say to people in meditation retreats, everyone wants results, and we worry when they don't seem to come as fast as we would like. And so in the matter of technique and the manner of practice, I suggest, well, do this and try looking at the breath in this kind of way, and observe the texture of bodily experience and so forth, and then give it 20 years. Yeah, this is something which people who know me recognize, but it just points to the fact that we need to give these things time. Some people are very, very quick, and they, in a few months maybe, they gain a great deal of wisdom through some simple practices. But most people simply need to live with something, to make it part of their lives, and for some practice and attitude in life to become part of your life, it needs time. It needs time to sink in. The great things, I was showing Mickey, our coordinator, the view of the forest behind me before we started. Very beautiful, because we live in this monastery on about 160 acres, and right now it's very, very green and beautiful. And but all of these trees behind me, most of them are probably as old or older than I am, and they know better than I do that this kind of life requires time. The nutrition, the way in which things are absorbed out of the soil and the minerals and the moisture, and the kind of patience of a tree to endure through a Canadian winter and then leaf out again in the spring and be ready and willing to grow once again. This is the rhythm of natural life. This same kind of rhythm exists within a human being too, not like a tree exactly, but we can see in natural life around us plenty to offer us valuable insights, metaphors, and so forth as to how to conduct ourselves and what kinds of expectations to have, for instance, in the practices that we inquire into and pursue in our meditation lives. So patience, this also is a great theme for Ajahn Chah, patient endurance. This is the heart of what he would often say. This is the heart of the holy life. He's just echoing the Buddha's words in this case. Patient endurance. So seeing the value in something, reflecting on it, living with it, sort of sitting it on your lap and taking good care of it over a long period of time, seeing its value, and then being willing to continue with it. Nurture it, sit with it, watch it, and reflect on what it is that it brings into your life. So there are, in Ajahn Chah's lineage, there are now over 300 monasteries, I think. Most of them are in Thailand, but as I was saying earlier, there are, I'm just off the top of my head, I'll say maybe a dozen or so in Europe and in Canada. There are several in Australia. There's at least one in Malaysia, I think, and elsewhere. So it's very much a vibrant tradition. And many very fine and experienced teachers have come out of this tradition. Some of them rather well known for writing many books. I think of one, for instance, right now, Ajahn Sucitto, who is an English monk, a very wonderful writer, and something that he wrote years ago has really stuck with me over time too, because it touches upon this theme of patience with our practice, because we need patience in order to see its beauty. We need patience to begin to become awake to its own rhythms, its life, you might say. He said, what sustains a spiritual life is that it becomes independent of one's own volition. It has a life of its own that one comes to recognize and serve. I've always loved this formulation very much, because what it says about spiritual practice is that if we give ourselves to it, it acquires its own agency, okay, its own power, its own force. And I think as spiritual practitioners, we become more and more adept at seeing the truth in letting go. Letting go of our own desires, our our own senses of which things we should be doing, our preferences, and so forth, and giving over to the agency of this spiritual practice that we've given so much attention to, we do begin to see its value, its virtue, its kind of force and power, and the wisdom that is contained in that. But this takes time. This is another one of those things that takes patience, takes time, and slowly it begins to dawn on us that we've really been nurturing this beautiful little life in the midst of ourselves, and that it has something to say to us. It needs to be attended to, cared for, yes, but as it grows stronger, we can more and more rely upon it. Meditation has a lot to say about watching the breath, for instance, and a lot to say about silence, because so much of meditation has to do with what at least we in the West will call getting out of the way. What we mean by that, and I'm sort of looking at Mickey and thinking about Indonesians, because I don't know many Indonesians, and so some of these expressions might not sound very familiar, but this sense of getting out of the way for us would mean getting our personality, our wishes, our particular approaches and preferences, letting them subside, and seeing what remains in our experience after our own preferences, our views and opinions have gotten out of the way. Okay, this is what this expression means, and for me, this is what Ajahn Sucitto's lovely little formulation that I just read means. What sustains a spiritual life is that it becomes independent of one's own volition. It has a life of its own that one comes to recognize and serve. It reminds me a little bit of what parenting can be like sometimes, because children, of course, they have their own personalities, their needs, their own ways of looking at the world, and what parents will often describe is a kind of maturation in themselves to see that they need to pay attention to children just to see who they are, because they aren't copies of the parents. They are in fact individuals in and of themselves. So we feed them, we nurture them, we give them our care and education and support them in every way that we can. But they take on a life of their own. They have a personality and a particular and unique approach. And in that way, a kind of wisdom can come out of that if they're left to properly flourish as human beings. So there's a little bit of a similarity there. I've mentioned that Lumpur Viradhammo, Ajahn Viradhammo, is the abbot of this monastery, and as I say, he, as a young monk, was trained under Ajahn Chah. We see him every day, and he regularly gives Dhamma talks, so that's very nice. And also sometimes he just comes in the morning and he has something he's been reflecting on. So it's nice. It's lovely to live with a mature practitioner, a wise practitioner of this caliber, because observations that he makes in the middle of the day maybe are what most of us would call good Dhamma talks. Yeah. So he came in for breakfast one morning and he said, right view is silent. Right view is silent. Now, from one perspective, of course, right view is populated with all kinds of sentences, good ideas, important ideas that the Buddha laid down. Right view has to do with the three characteristics of existence, and of course the Four Noble Truths, and how it is that we view karma and the fruit of karma, and on and on and on. So right view, in one sense, is very, very complicated and populated with important ideas. Luang Por Viardamo, though, of course, was looking at it from a different perspective, and probably coming out of his meditation experience, where increasingly there is just the presence of silence, a kind of emptiness, not a vacuity, but a silence of the mind, a pure receptiveness of the mind to experience as it's arising in each moment. And after all, how is it that we will understand the texture of experience, the nature of momentary experience, if we don't let it speak to us in its own right? And that's only going to happen when we get out of the way, when our preferences, when our ideas about what's happening subside, when they become quiet, when they become silent. So this is just the reflection of a very mature practitioner in our tradition, which I have the great fortune to live with. And it reminds me too of Luang Por Sumedho. Ajahn Sumedho was the senior-most Western disciple of Ajahn Chah, and he is now 87, so he's a very elderly man. And he moved to Wat Papong, which is the monastery of Ajahn Chah in the northeast of Thailand. He moved there as a young 30-something-year-old and endured the hardships of that life, and then became a teacher in his own way, and established the monasteries in England, first of all, in Europe, and helped to sort of guide the establishment of monasteries elsewhere. And years ago, when he was visiting Tisarana, he was his attendant monk was coming in to just maybe offer him some tea in the middle of the morning or something like that. And Luang Por was he had his chair faced the window, looking outside to the forest, very beautiful, maybe looking at some birds, because there's a bird feeder outside of the window that he would have been sitting at. Anyway, he was just sitting there, very, very peaceful, with a silent mind, I'm sure. And the attendant monk came and offered him his tea or whatever it was he was offering. And Luang Por Sumedho then just turned to him and said, "The empty mind is so bright and beautiful." And that's the kind of expression, kind of reflection that monks in our tradition value very much. It's a very, very simple thing to remember, but it speaks to and it speaks out of. It communicates from, in this case, many decades of monastic life, of meditative life, reflecting on the nature, the structure, the texture of experience. And it's distilled in a way. So often the necessary, but also the incidental complications of Dhamma become distilled into something very, very simple, where wisdom is seeing things as they are. So this I think of this reflection of Luang Por Sumedho because it seems to reflect so beautifully the teachings, the wisdom that he gained from studying so long under Ajahn Chah. And it shows how a tradition of meditation, a tradition of wisdom is passed on from one generation to the next to the next. This isn't saying, of course, that one needs to be a monk in order to become more wise in their lives, because meditation is open to us all. Study, reflection, studying the Dhamma, reading the suttas, all of these things are going to enrich our understanding of this practice and this life. But it's through meditation, I think, that we most keenly perceive things as they are, and come to realize the truth that the Dhamma has to offer. That encourages us to investigate, to reflect on, and to realize. So I was told 30 minutes or so is a good time, and perhaps this is a good time to bring this set of reflections to an end. I hope something in this has been of benefit, and I wish you all well in your practice.
Thank you very much, Ajahn. Is there any question for the...
Yeah, so, and I'll just say again hello to most of the people on the screen I recognize, and maybe some are from Ottawa or Toronto or something, but it's very, very nice to see familiar faces. And as it is very nice to meet Mickey's acquaintance. Thank you for doing the work it takes to organize these things, Mickey. I know you have a large membership behind you. I'm sure it's very valuable what you do.
Maybe there is a question from the audience. You may open the mic. Asking Ajahn. Ajahn, I have one question, Ajahn.
Mm-hmm.
What is the effect for our meditation if we are not keep our sila well?
Well, sila is a foundation for it. It's a very good question, because it can be something that people, I would say, this might be, it might have been a tendency in the West at one time, at least. We learn about meditation maybe through yoga practice or whatever, and we go right to meditation as something to be done and to gain benefit from. But without sila, without virtue, without establishing virtue and really gaining a foundation in it, meditation practice will be difficult, because the mind cannot be settled if our thoughts, words, or actions are bringing disharmony, let's say, to the world around us or to ourselves. If we're acting in a way which is inconsistent with the well-being of ourselves and others, this is not going to be at all a foundation for gaining any kind of peace and clarity in meditation. So it's very, very important. And one of the beautiful things that you begin to see is that, as lay people, you think of 5 precepts, and they're very simple in a way. Don't kill, don't steal, don't misuse sex, or don't lie, So they're very simple to observe in one sense. But what happens as Ajahn Sucitto said, as the agency of practice takes over and becomes instilled in us, is that our approach to virtue, our approach to the precepts, becomes more and more refined over time. So, and as it becomes more and more refined, the stability and the kind of beauty of this foundation becomes more grounded, more solid, more able to contain our lives properly. So all of these things work hand in hand. So it's very important. Anyone just needs to try to sit down and meditate after they've had an argument with their husband or wife, for instance, or you've scolded your child and maybe you regret the tone of your voice or something like that, or you've had an argument with your boss at work, or whatever it is. We just need to reflect on that to see how easy or how difficult, in fact, it is for the mind to settle, just to become clear again. So, these are very important things to remind ourselves of daily, and it's a very valuable avenue with which to focus our mindfulness too. Because after all, we live in the world, we live with other people, we're engaged with other people. Our own attitudes have an effect on our lives and our perspective on things. And we get to see through mindfulness what the effect of various attitudes and actions and speech patterns and so forth are, what effect they have on our experience. So it's just part of practice in a way. I think as we come to appreciate its value, the value of virtue, and upholding it and refining it and cultivating it and becoming a kind of connoisseur of goodness, you might say. There is a beauty in that, and it becomes evident throughout a person's life. I think it becomes evident to us as practitioners that it's of vital importance. And there could be a kind of meditator, there could be a kind of precept to, okay, when I have neglected something, or if I've said something or done something I later regret, what do I do now? Because we can't live without making mistakes. That's because we're not enlightened, yeah? So what do we do now? Well, there has to be some sort of practice of forgiveness, of recognizing, of seeing clearly what it is that we've done, what we've undertaken, what we've said, and so forth. And then seeing it clearly, acknowledging it clearly, sitting it on our lap. Yeah, okay, that was what was happening. This is what went through my mind. This is where I slipped. My mindfulness didn't catch this impulse quickly enough. Something like that. And then just let it go. Because letting go is so much a part of practice. Attachment, of course, isn't just attachment to pleasant food and physical sensation. Attachment also is to things that we hold on to which don't do us any good at all. Which is things like regret and self-incrimination and so forth. No, we need to. Part of our practice needs to be to understand how to skillfully let go of these things, to recognize them and let go of them and move on. That's letting go too.
Is there any question from the audience? Open the mic for question. Ajahn, another question: how is the best practice to bring our meditation to daily life? Or while driving?
The best practice to bring meditation into daily life, is that the question?
Yes.
Well, I would say we can turn back to one of the observations or the reflections that I read out earlier, which is, Ajahn Chah says we need to find our own practice and persevere. I think the answer to that will probably vary from person to person. Some people might find it very valuable to keep a journal and to reflect, maybe at the end of each day on how things have gone and where the Dhamma applied and how they are able to bring it into life, perhaps. Some people might, in terms of meditation itself, I sometimes speak a lot about walking meditation. It's something that I enjoy a lot, and some people will be more given to walking meditation than to sitting meditation, for example. That's just a very simple example where people's dispositions, where they are in their life, maybe it's become more difficult for them to assume a formal sitting posture, as an example. But bringing meditation into daily life, I think, will vary along similar lines. You might want to focus very much on the quality of your speech and the intention, the mood of the mind that calls forth certain forms of speech. I sometimes, for myself, I found it useful to write out a little list of Dhamma terms. The 3 characteristics of existence, or say the 10 Bharami. Okay, So virtues that the Buddha was using and perfecting finally to become fully awakened. And just reflecting on one of those for a week and go through them, 1 week at a time. What is virtue? What is generosity? How does generosity look in my daily life? At the end of each day, where did I express some generosity in my life with my experiences and my friends and family today? Or just using it as a kind of touchstone for daily reflection. So that's an idea too. It's very much congenial with or consistent with our meditation too, because it means that during the course of day-to-day life, we're bringing the Dhamma into our life more actively. It's becoming an agent. It's taking on a life of its own, literally. In the midst of our life, we might work in an office building or drive a cab or something like that, but it means that it's coming to the fore in our consciousness, in our experience more and more. And by doing so, it means that when we come to sit in meditation, as an example, we're much more likely to have to be in a settled place where our virtue has been kept quite well during a day. But it might also mean that the barami that we were bringing up and reflecting on from time to time during the day, that particular perfection is kind of something which naturally comes up for in the midst of the silence of the mind in meditation, seeing maybe more clearly what aditan or what the satya parami or whatever, what it really means to be truthful in life. It may come up in meditation in this way. So I think that making meditation our life or bringing meditation into our life is very important. And as you said earlier, it very much is founded on the quality of virtue that we are able to express and develop in our lives. But beyond that, we have a huge toolkit to use. And as practitioners, I think we need to select a few things and, kind of keep them in our pocket, you might say, to have available, to pull out at any time. I keep one of those multi-tools on my belt, because I always seem to be, turning a screw or needing a little pair of scissors or something like that. So it's a little bit like a multi-tool, the Dhamma as a multi-tool. Okay, and you can't have all the tools. You'd have to have a big moving cart, and it would weigh a couple of 100 kilos or something. That wouldn't be practical at all. Maybe some people can use much more, have much more tools available to hand. But for me, just having a few things, very useful tools that I can use for a variety of tasks is useful. And I think of meditation and my reflection in Dhamma in similar terms. So I hope some of that is useful for you.
Thank you very much. Okay, is there any question from the audience? Okay, open the mic. Maybe no question for the Ajahn. Maybe you have a closing statement, Ajahn?
Closing statement. All I've been doing is talking, Mickey. Yes. Well, I obviously it's always a privilege as a monk to be able to offer some Dhamma reflection, because it always feels valuable and nourishing. I hope some of these things might have been helpful to those of you on this call and those who will listen to the talk later, but just to express my own appreciation for the opportunity, because it's it's very valuable as a practitioner to have this kind of opportunity to reflect on Dhamma in public. So I do appreciate the invitation, and may we all grow in Dhamma. You know, as a monk years and years ago, I heard him say, I was very taken with this. He, very wonderful monk, an Australian monk who has lived for many years in Australia, and at the end of his Dhamma talk, he said, "May you all become enlightened. May you all become enlightened before me." So it's not a race, it's not a competition. We only have our own predicament and the particular nature of the beauty that we can bring forth in the world. This is what we have to work with, and I wish us all well in the pursuit of wisdom and a pure heart.
Thank you very much, Ajahn.
You're welcome.
This is all for the meeting for today. Thank you, Ajahn.
Okay.
And everyone. I will end this meeting.
Very good. Bye-bye. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon.